When I think back to that day, it still feels like a snapshot out of a picture-perfect family album. The kind where everyone's smiling, the sun is glowing, and nothing could possibly go wrong. I was wrong. Horribly wrong. It started as a sunny Saturday in late June. My husband, Ryan, and I had planned a trip to the beach with our 8-month-old daughter, Lily. It was her first real outing since she'd started crawling, and I had been so excited for her to touch sand for the first time. I packed the diaper bag with the precision of a seasoned mom. Extra clothes, formula, wipes, toys, even her sun hat. Everything except sunscreen. It wasn't like I forgot. I just didn't think it was necessary. I read somewhere that babies under 1 shouldn't wear sunscreen. I told Ryan when he asked if I packed any. We'll keep her under the umbrella most of the time. Ryan raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He trusted me, and honestly, I trusted myself. I had read some article in a mom blog that said babies have sensitive skin, and sunscreen might cause a reaction. So I decided we'd just shade her and keep the visit short. The beach was beautiful. We laid out the umbrella, set Lily down on a soft towel, and watched her wide-eyed wonder as her fingers brushed over the grains of sand. She squealed with delight, felt magical. But it was also hot, around 85 degrees with barely a breeze. The kind of day that makes your skin sting after just a few minutes of direct sunlight. We thought we were careful. We kept her under the umbrella, gave her water frequently, and made sure she wore her little hat. Still, as the hours passed, we got comfortable. Too comfortable. At one point, I took her down to the shoreline to let the cool water touch her toes. She loved it, splashing her chubby legs in the gentle waves. I didn't notice how long we stayed out there. Maybe 10, 15 minutes? Maybe more. By the time we packed up to leave, Lily looked a little flushed. She's just warm, I told myself. We'll get her cooled off in the car. The drive back was quiet. Lily had fallen asleep in her car seat, and I remember looking at her pink cheeks in the rearview mirror and thinking, she looks like a little tomato. I laughed. I still can't believe I laughed. But the real horror began when we got home. I went to lift her out of the car seat and she whimpered. Not her usual sleepy cry. This was different, strained, pained. I brought her inside and laid her on the changing mat. That's when I saw it. Her skin, especially on her arms, cheeks, and the tops of her tiny feet, was bright red. Angry red. I gently touched her arm and she flinched. Then she cried. No, screamed. Ryan came running in and saw her skin. What happened? He asked, panic rising in his voice. She's burned. Oh my God. She's sunburned. I froze. My mind raced. How could this happen? She was under the umbrella. She wore a hat. We weren't out that long. But none of that mattered. Because the truth was simple and brutal. She was sunburned, and it was my fault. We didn't wait. Ryan was already pulling up urgent care locations on his phone while I held Lily, trying desperately to soothe her cries. Her skin was hot to the touch, and every time I shifted her even slightly in my arms, she whimpered or let out a sharp cry. I was holding my daughter, but she was hurting because of me. We drove in silence. Lily cried most of the way, and my heart cracked with each sob. I was watching her suffer from something so easily preventable, and that guilt sat like a weight on my chest. Ryan didn't say much, but I could feel his tension, like he was biting his tongue. Urgent care. The nurse took one look at Lily's skin and ushered us in ahead of others. The doctor came in within minutes. He was calm, but his face grew serious the longer he examined her. She has a first-degree sunburn, he said, primarily on her face, arms, and feet. It's not life-threatening, but for a baby this young, it's definitely concerning. He looked directly at me, not with judgment, but with a kind of forced patience. The kind people use when they're trying not to make you feel worse than you already do. Did she have any sunscreen on? He asked gently. I shook my head. No. I thought it wasn't recommended for babies under 1. He nodded. That's true in some cases, but for brief exposure, it's safer than a burn. It's a common misconception. The AAP says limited use of sunscreen is okay if shade and protective clothing aren't enough. My stomach dropped. I had made a decision based on outdated or misinterpreted advice, and Lily paid the price. They gave us some aloe-based ointment and instructed us to monitor her closely for fever, blistering, or signs of dehydration. Her sunburn wasn't severe enough to require hospitalization, but we were told to keep her cool and hydrated and to follow up with her pediatrician in a day or two. We drove home, and for the first time, Ryan finally said something. We should have known better. It wasn't mean. It wasn't accusatory. But it hit harder than if he'd yelled. That night was one of the longest of my life. Lily wouldn't sleep unless I held her, and even then, she whimpered in her sleep. I kept applying the ointment as prescribed, gently patting her skin with damp cloths to cool her down. I held her tiny hand, kissed her forehead, whispered apologies over and over into the dark. I cried silently, trying not to let my tears fall onto her red cheeks. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The moment I dismissed sunscreen, the time we spent by the water, the way I brushed off her flushed face on the way home. I felt like a failure. By morning, the redness had dulled slightly. She looked better, but she still wasn't herself. No giggles, no babbles, just a quiet baby with wide, tired eyes. I called her pediatrician. She listened carefully, and then asked something I hadn't expected. How are you doing, Mom? I broke down. Because the truth was, I wasn't okay. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling sick. This wasn't just a mistake. This was my baby. The pediatrician reassured me that Lily would be okay, and that I wasn't a bad mother. She said mistakes happen, even heartbreaking ones. But we have to learn from them and do better next time. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I deserved that kindness. Because no matter what anyone said, I still believed one thing with my whole heart. I failed to protect my daughter, and I would never forgive myself for that. The days that followed felt like a slow-motion blur. Lily's sunburn gradually began to heal, but the emotional wounds inside me were raw and fresh. Every time I looked at her soft little arms, now slightly peeling, I felt a stab of guilt. She had forgiven me. I could see it in her trusting eyes. Babies don't hold grudges. But I couldn't forgive myself. Ryan and I barely talked about what happened. It wasn't because we were angry at each other. It was because neither of us knew what to say. The silence between us was heavy. Every time he looked at Lily, I wondered if he was blaming me. Maybe he wasn't. But I was. I began to obsess over parenting forums, medical articles, and sunscreen guidelines. I was trying to educate myself, but it was also my way of punishing myself, replaying my mistake over and over through the words of strangers. One night, I came across a thread titled, "What's the worst parenting mistake you've made?" The responses ranged from lighthearted to heartbreaking. Forgetting to buckle a car seat correctly, feeding a baby something they were allergic to, not noticing a fever until it turned into a seizure. One woman wrote, "I let my son get sunburned at 9 months old. I've never forgiven myself, but I learned." I stared at that sentence for a long time. I wasn't alone. The next morning, I finally sat down with Ryan. "I need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "I can't stop thinking about it, about what I did. I hurt her. I made a choice based on a blog post and didn't double-check. I should have asked the pediatrician or packed sunscreen anyway. I thought I was protecting her, but I wasn't. I don't know how to get past it." Ryan sighed and took my hand. "I was scared too," he said. "And yeah, I was mad for a moment, but not at you, at the situation, at how easy it is to get something like that wrong. You weren't careless, you were trying to do what you thought was best. That doesn't make you a bad mom. It just means you're human." His words gave me permission to breathe again. But I still had to do something with the guilt. I started talking to other moms in my online groups. I shared our story, not for sympathy, but as a warning. I wanted someone else to read my post and think twice before leaving the sunscreen behind. Some thanked me. Others admitted they'd done the same. A few even reached out privately to ask questions. It wasn't just a story. It became a conversation. I also took Lily back to her pediatrician for a follow-up. By then, her skin had healed almost completely. There was no sign of scarring or long-term damage, which felt like a miracle. She bounced back beautifully, the doctor said. Babies are resilient, and so are moms. Those words stuck with me. Resilient. That didn't mean we didn't fall. It meant we stood back up, wiser, stronger, and determined never to make the same mistake again. That night, as I rocked Lily to sleep, I kissed the top of her soft head and whispered, "I'm sorry. I love you more than life. And I promise I'll never stop learning how to be better for you." She stirred a little in her sleep, then settled back into my chest, her tiny breath warm against my neck. And for the first time since the beach, I felt just a sliver of peace. As the weeks passed, Lily's sunburn was nothing more than a distant memory, a painful lesson wrapped in a healing reminder. But for me, the lesson lingered. It lived in every decision I made after that day, in the careful way I checked the weather, in the meticulousness with which I applied sunscreen whenever we went outside. In the research I did before making any parenting decision. I had become the overprepared mom, the one who triple-checked the SPF on every bottle of sunscreen, the one who made sure the hat I bought had a 50+ UV rating. The one who made sure to always pack a full change of clothes for Lily, just in case, but that wasn't enough. I knew I couldn't stop at simply being more cautious. I wanted to do something tangible with my guilt, something that would make sure my mistake wasn't in vain. So I began talking about it. A lot. Not just to Ryan or my mom, but to everyone. At playdates, at family gatherings, even at the grocery store. I shared my experience with anyone who would listen, not just to make them aware of the dangers of sun exposure, but to remind them that mistakes happen. That no one was perfect, and as much as we may try to protect our children, we will inevitably make missteps. One afternoon, I posted a video on social media recounting the entire story. I talked about how easy it was to get it wrong, how I made the decision to skip sunscreen because of bad advice, and how I was too afraid to admit it at first. I told them about Lily's sunburn, about how heart-wrenching it was to see my baby in pain, and about how guilty I felt. It wasn't a viral video. It didn't get thousands of likes or shares. But what mattered to me was the response from other parents. Dozens of them wrote to me saying they had made the same mistake or were grateful for the reminder. Some admitted they hadn't thought about the sunscreen at all. In those responses, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: community. Through that video, I learned that sometimes our mistakes are the greatest tools for teaching others. My pain, my guilt, my shame, they didn't have to be in vain. They could be part of something bigger, something that helped others avoid the same hurt. Lily, of course, had no idea what had happened. She was too young to remember the burn or the struggle, too innocent to know that her mother had failed her once. But I wasn't going to let that stop me from making sure it never happened again. I also reached out to a few pediatricians and dermatologists for advice on proper sun safety for babies. They were incredibly kind, answering all my questions and even providing a few tips that weren't well known. For example, I learned that although sunscreen is crucial for babies older than 6 months, babies younger than 6 months should be kept out of direct sunlight as much as possible. Umbrellas, hats, and long sleeves were the safest route. The more I learned, the more I wanted to help other parents avoid my mistake. I became an advocate for sun safety in my small circle. I shared what I learned with other new moms at playgroups and in online forums. I compiled a list of resources on baby-safe sun products, sun protection tips, and what to do if a baby does get sunburned. I even started a small blog dedicated to baby safety, focusing on topics like sunburn, allergies, and other common health concerns. Each time I helped another parent, it felt like I was healing a little more. The guilt didn't disappear, it still crept in during moments of self-doubt. But it wasn't as suffocating as it had been in the beginning. I had done something proactive with it, something positive, and slowly my heart began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the worst mom in the world. Time passed, as it always does, and Lily continued to grow into the vibrant, curious little girl she was meant to be. Her sunburn was a distant memory, and her skin was as soft and flawless as it had been before the accident. But I'll never forget that time or the lessons I learned along the way. The guilt, while still present at times, had transformed into something else, something productive, something that fueled my desire to become a better, more informed parent. I became the kind of mother who didn't just follow the rules but took the time to understand them. I read more about child safety, the best practices for raising a healthy child, and how to ensure their well-being in a world that sometimes didn't make things easy, but more importantly, I learned to forgive myself. That was the hardest part. In those early days, when Lily's sunburn was at its worst, I couldn't imagine a time when I would feel at peace with myself again. The guilt I felt was a constant companion, pulling me down whenever I allowed myself a moment of reflection. I thought I would always be haunted by that mistake. But as time went on, I realized something powerful: mistakes don't define us. What defines us is how we respond to them. And I responded by becoming an advocate for Sun's safety, for learning from our missteps, for the importance of asking questions and seeking advice when we're uncertain. I responded by creating a community where others could learn from my experience and avoid the same pain. Ryan and I had many late-night conversations about what had happened, about how I had felt responsible for Lily's pain. He listened patiently but always reminded me that no one could anticipate every possible danger, no one could be perfect. Parenting was a journey, and on that journey we were all bound to make mistakes. It took me a long time to believe that. It wasn't until I started seeing how much our story helped others that I felt the weight begin to lift. Every time another mom reached out to me, every time I got a message from someone saying, "I learned from you," I felt a little bit of the guilt slip away. Because I realized then, sharing our stories can heal others just as they heal us. Lily is now a toddler, full of energy and always on the move. She loves the outdoors, loves the sun, but I never let my guard down. Every outing is planned with Sun's safety in mind, and I make sure to keep her under the shade as much as possible. She still wears her hat, and I've learned to reapply sunscreen every 2 hours. The sunburn is long gone, but the lessons it taught me are still part of me. I am a better parent because of that mistake, and I will continue to strive to be the best mother I can be for Lily, just as every parent should. We make mistakes, but we don't let them break us. We grow from them. We do better, and we learn to forgive ourselves along the way. I watched Lily play in the sandbox one afternoon, her little feet kicking up the sand. I couldn't help but smile. Her laughter filled the air, and I realized that, despite everything, my love for her was stronger than any mistake I could ever make. She had no memory of the burn, no understanding of my guilt, but she trusted me. She loved me unconditionally. And that was enough. We may never be perfect, but we can always strive to be better. And that's what I promised myself the day I learned the hardest lesson of my life, that no matter what, I would always do my best to protect her.